Hello, guys, and welcome to our final video of the school year. I truly can't believe it. It's unbelievable. Makes me already miss you guys, and it's been such a pleasure this year, just this whole year. Even though we only got to spend 2/3 of the year together, guys, it flew by, and I couldn't be happier to have you guys in class this year. It was my first time teaching 10th grade, and hope you guys learned a lot. I know I learned a lot, and it was truly, truly awesome. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for everything. So today is like I said, it's our last lesson. This is it. We're going to this is part 2. Remember, on today's Wednesday. So on Monday, we did part 1 of our quiz, our final quiz, obviously. So that was worth 50 points. Today is going to be worth the second half, so the second 50 points, and we'll combine today's grade on today's assignment and on Monday's assignment to be your final quiz grade of the year. Again, 50-50. And then Friday will be your test, and we'll do the test. Now, some of you guys are asking me, like, what do I do? How do I prepare for the test? What should I do? Couple different things. You can always, as a refresher, you can go back and watch any of these videos that you want. All the content is up for you guys. I'm also going to upload the PowerPoint, which I've been doing. I think the PowerPoint is probably your best way to study. Go through the PowerPoint. Anything that you're not sure of, you could always reach out. But I think rewatching the videos, if you want to do that, some of the videos are a little bit longer. But if you got some downtime, feel free to watch the videos. But definitely to study for the test, use the PowerPoint. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do like a big review or to do a study guide or any of that stuff. So we're just going to go for it on Friday. So once again, last time, look at the PowerPoint, watch some of the videos, and then if you have any questions at all, reach out. Ask me. I have some emails right now that I need to get back to you guys on. As soon as this video is over, I'll get back to those emails for some of you guys asking questions. And that should be it for Friday's test. What else? I definitely had something else to say. And during the test, you can use the PowerPoint, right? I mean, I'm not expecting you to do it off memory, right? You're home. It's a take-home type of test. I just ask that you do it individually. And if you want to work with someone, listen, it's not the end of the world to me. If you really want to do that, that's fine. But work hard, come up with your own unique answers, discuss through the answers, use whatever references that you want to. And I think you guys will be fine. Okay. So today is going to be our last phase of the Civil War. We have covered a lot of information, guys. I'm not going to review the whole thing like I usually do in the beginning of videos, but I will start with a brief overview review of what we did last class, just to get your brain going a little bit here on this Wednesday. So here we go. So there's Grant. And Grant he was dominating the war out west. West would be, what would be, Louisiana by the Mississippi River, out by Texas. Not what we consider West to be today, but West was, New Orleans, Mississippi, Alabama, that area. And Grant was dominating out there. He showed his superiority, winning the Battle of Shiloh in a surprise attack, winning the Battle of New Orleans, slowly but surely gaining access of that really important port city. But remember, back east, there were big problems for the Union. Back east, you had that all-star group of generals for the Confederacy, for the South. You had General Lee. You had Stonewall Jackson. You had General Joseph Johnston. So on the east, there were a lot of issues, a lot of problems that Lincoln had to face, and he could not find a good general. He tried this guy McClellan for all these years, who, by the way, is going to run against him for president in 1864. Lincoln beats him up pretty easily. But Lincoln's generals are just weak, and they let the Confederacy retreat, and they just keep getting beat. So overall, if we look at the map here, the West was a lot of victories for the Union, and the East, we see a whole bunch of victories for the Confederacy. So something had to give here. It was enough of the the draws, I guess you can say, or enough of the stalemate. Something needed to change, and there are going to be big changes in this final phase of the Civil War here. Okay, we talked about the shift in war aims, what the Emancipation Proclamation was, and how now it wasn't just about defeating the South. People in the North were getting upset, and they were saying, we are losing tens of thousands of family members, of friends. For what? This should be about slavery. That's the deep-rooted issue with this war. So the Civil War, although really people argue that the whole time that we're fighting over slavery, Lincoln nails it, puts it on paper, puts it in a speech. The Emancipation Proclamation is released after a huge victory at a place called Antietam. So the Union wins at Antietam. Lincoln releases the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, and just like that, the shift of the war has changed. Okay. And we talked about the 54th Infantry, Massachusetts Infantry, all African Americans who fought bravely. They played a huge part in the war, especially in the Carolinas. And then this is where we left off last class. This was our turning point. That man that you see in the picture there, who lie dead, is Stonewall Jackson. And it could have been, I don't know, coincidence. It could have been directly related to this. But after Stonewall Jackson's death at Chancellorsville, even though the South won Chancellorsville, they won that battle, the Confederacy won it. Remember, this man, Stonewall Jackson, was killed by friendly fire, which really sucks if you're the Confederacy. But after his death in 1863, the war slowly went downhill for the South. Lee was still strong, Johnston was still strong, but to lose one of your big three, I guess you could say, Stonewall Jackson, that's a big downfall here. Okay, so new content. Let's go. I think there's 3 slides of information. I got lots of pictures for you guys today. So I bet you've all heard before of Gettysburg, or at least the Gettysburg Address. So Gettysburg is located in Pennsylvania, okay? Now remember, earlier, to win the war, the Confederacy, the South, they wanted to prove that they can't only win battles on their own land, that they could also push up into the North, that they could also come into Union states like Maryland or like Pennsylvania, or even eventually maybe New York, New Jersey. So Lee, once again, General Robert E. Lee, the great military genius, the captain, the leader, the general of the Confederacy, he wants to invade the North again. And what he does, he comes up with this plan where he's going to push up from Virginia with 75,000 men. Now, picture in your head what 75,000 people look like. Armed soldiers fighting, ready to go. That's more than most football stadiums hold when they're at max capacity. Picture like a soccer game or a football game, or baseball stadiums only hold like 40 or 50,000. So just picture in your head what a marching 75,000 soldiers looks like. That's a lot of people. So Lee's plan is to come and invade the North, and he eventually gets into Pennsylvania, which is a Union state, and he has these plans, obviously, just to keep pushing. And remember as well, the South was hungry, and they had not as many supplies as they wanted. So they go on this, they call it a shoe raid, where they're going in all these towns in Pennsylvania. They're literally taking people's shoes that live there. They're looking for shoes. They're looking for food at this point as well. They're raiding farms. They're going into people's yards, picking, vegetables and fruits off of their trees and off their plants, and going into their houses and taking food. So on their way north, now that these Southern troops are not in their own land anymore, where they're being surrounded, where they're being not, I was going to use the word quarantine, but they're being basically trapped with the Anaconda Plan. Now they're coming into Pennsylvania. They're stealing shoes. They're stealing goods, all basically 2 birds, 1 stone, all while they're pushing deep into the North. Now, eventually what happens here is that the Union troops here, I forget the name of the general. Who was the Union general here? I lost his name. That's okay. So the Union basically in Gettysburg meets up with Lee, and it's like these 2 huge superpowers clashing, like 75,000 versus 100,000. And there is 3 days of battle in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the battles of Gettysburg, massive losses. We could sit here and talk about battle strategy, but just understand that after 3 days of fighting, the Union wound up losing 23,000 soldiers in just 3 days. The Confederacy lost 20,000. Now, remember also another big factor, the Confederacy can't afford to lose as many people. Remember, the Union had a superior advantage in terms of population and the number of people they had. So sure, 23,000 people is a lot, and that's awful. But that was a lower percentage of their population, of their soldiers, than the Confederacy. So the Confederacy losing 20,000 was a lot of soldiers. So after 3 days of fighting, Lee once again is forced to retreat. George Meade, that's the name of the guy. George Meade was the general that replaced McClellan in the North. So Meade, Union, defeats Lee here at Gettysburg. What do you do when you're losing a battle? You retreat. So Lee, once again, smart, he realizes we need to cut our losses. We have to get out of here. We have to leave Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. They're going to retreat south. What state's right under Pennsylvania? It's Virginia. That is where General Lee and the Confederacy retreat to. That's where they go down to. Now, what is Lincoln mad about? Why was Lincoln so pissed at McClellan? What did McClellan keep not doing? Think about it. What was McClellan not doing? He wasn't finishing off the Confederacy. He wasn't, giving them that final blow, putting them out of their misery, ending it. So once again, this is not McClellan. I know it's a lot of names, guys. Try your best. Rewind if you need to. General Meade in the North, once again, just like McClellan, allows Lee to escape. So at Gettysburg, the Union, the North wins, but they don't deliver that final blow. They don't put them out. They don't capture them. They don't force them to surrender. They don't even pursue them, the Confederacy, as they're retreating into Virginia. So that's not good. That's just going to give them another chance to re-up, to gain their health back, to eat, to improve the size of their army and the quality. So that's not good. So once again, Lincoln is upset. It happens over and over again for the North, where they just keep allowing the South to escape. But Gettysburg is a huge clash. Once again, it's a big confidence booster for the Union. And then Abe Lincoln, you can see this picture here on the right, the very, very famous Gettysburg Address. So basically, Lincoln, after this 3 days of fighting, he comes into Gettysburg and he gets on a podium and he talks in front of the people. There's no microphones or any of that stuff, so he's got to really project his voice. And he addresses the nation, addresses the Union, and he does this big speech. Once again, it's called the Gettysburg Address, which basically did, definitely asking you this question, the two things that the Gettysburg Address did, okay? First, Lincoln took a step back and basically said, you know what, let's just take a minute here and let's dedicate a national cemetery to all of those people that gave their lives. Although, we talk about, I think when we talk about war, we throw around a lot of numbers, and we're just like, 23,000 lost there, 20,000 lost there. The amount of people that is in 3 days is outrageous. Think about 23,000 people. That's 23,000 families that are affected, 23,000 people that will never see their friends, their family again. They will never go home again. So Lincoln realizes this. He takes a step back and says, okay, we're going to dedicate a national cemetery here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which is not far from us. It's a couple hours from us. That would have been a cool class trip. But that basically dedicates a cemetery and says, thank you, and let's mourn for a second. And then the second thing that the Gettysburg Address does is it basically reminds everybody what the point of fighting the war was. And he says, this is not just to kill each other. This is not just to defeat the South. This is to make sure that we instill democratic ideals, that we abolish slavery, that we keep America, the Union, to a high democratic standard with good morals, with good values. So once again, the Gettysburg Address, after this big battle of Gettysburg here, dedicates a cemetery and also just basically reminds people, what the war was being fought for. Okay. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Oh, good quote. So Lincoln says about Meade, he says, we had them. We had them at Gettysburg. We had them in our hand. We had them right here in our palm, but we didn't close our palm. So that's a great thought. It's a great metaphor, or whatever you want to call it, to what's been going on here for the North. We had them. They're right in our palm. We had them defeated here at Gettysburg, just like we had them beat in so many other places. We didn't close our palm. We didn't finish them off. So again, that's a big issue that we keep running into, because McClellan was very hesitant, and then General George Meade as well, also very hesitant. Okay. Here is one of the battles here at Gettysburg. You can just kind of get a vision of what the fighting looked like. We talked about some of the technology that they used and the technology, right? This called Pickett's Charge. So at Gettysburg, the South had a great plan. They basically just were eventually outnumbered and outpowered. This guy named George Pickett with 15,000 charges directly right at the middle of the Union, who had the high ground. And then Lee and his men and some other generals as well went around the side. So you have George Pickett coming down the middle at Pickett's Charge with 15,000 and Lee and his men going around. But the Union held their ground at Gettysburg, like we talked about. They had high ground. They had more troops. So that's a big advantage. And this is Mr. George Meade. George Meade was the other hesitant general who eventually is kaput. He's put out as well. Okay, next one here. Let's keep on rolling, guys. So Lincoln finds his general, and we've done a couple readings, a couple assignments on this. He finds his general. Who is Lincoln's man? Who is Lincoln's go-to man eventually in this war? It's going to be future President Ulysses S. Grant. Grant becomes the 18th president, so we have Lincoln as president. Then in between him and Grant is a man named Andrew Johnson, so it's going to be Lincoln, Johnson, and then eventually Grant becomes the president. And Grant was dominant on the West, as we've talked about a lot. So now Lincoln officially, I don't know what took him so long, but Lincoln officially in 1864 makes Grant the head general of the Union. And he says, you're not just in control of the West anymore. You're going to control this entire Union army. It's on you now, okay? And remember, the goals of the North in the beginning, they wanted to do a couple of things. One was take that Mississippi River. Two was get Richmond. They still want that Mississippi River. So eventually, the summer of 1863, Grant and a guy named John Pemberton was actually the street that I grew up on, they overtake Vicksburg. Vicksburg is right here in Mississippi, literally on the Mississippi River. They get another port called Port Hudson. They take over Louisiana. Long story short, I won't, go crazy with the details on this, but Lincoln and Grant eventually do get, also thanks to the fact that they also took New Orleans, they have total control now of the Mississippi River, which is huge. It cuts the Confederacy right in half. You have your eastern side, your western side. So now, even though the Confederacy or the Union was still struggling a little bit on the east, they just won at Gettysburg, and now they just took the Mississippi River, so you could slowly see that the tides are turning here, okay? There's also, did I mention Vicksburg? Yeah, I mentioned Vicksburg. So Vicksburg, the siege of Vicksburg was 6 weeks, okay? Most battles took a day. They took maybe 2 days to get Vicksburg. The way that the Union got it was basically surrounding it. Remember that Anaconda plan where they surrounded it totally and basically constricted and forced, the Confederacy just to starve? Well, Vicksburg was really ugly for the Confederacy for the South because they were totally surrounded. They were being bombarded for 6 weeks. They were forced to eat their mules. They were eating rats. People thought, the stories of cannibalism, but it could be hearsay. It's not like Jamestown back in the day where people were eating each other, but people thought about it. People were eating mules. They were eating rats, eating whatever that they could find. And it was this 6-week siege. And eventually Vicksburg, they had to give up because they were surrounded. They were cut off. And that's a big win there. Okay. Now, Grant, we're going to talk about this term here. Third bullet point down, the war of attrition. What's Grant's strategy? How does he win so many battles? He was a great military mind, but deep in his mind, his thought was war of attrition, war of attrition. A war of attrition, like we've been talking about, is the North's plan to wear their opponent out. It's not that, I'm not going to say that Grant didn't care about the number of deaths and he didn't care about his people, because he did. But if you're going to beat somebody in anything, in a sporting game, in a chess game, in any competition, whatever you want, you got to use strategy. You have to take the advantages that you have and use those advantages. If you have, some sort of advantage, let's talk about a football game real quick, right? If you have a great offensive line and a great running back, and the other team's defensive line is not that good, are you going to pass the ball a lot? Or are you going to run the ball a lot? You're probably going to run the ball a lot because that's your advantage. They're weak up front. You're strong up front. Take that advantage, right? You would, I guess, be kind of dumb and silly not to take your advantage. But Grant takes his advantage, which is basically with the number of people he has, fight this war of attrition, and just keeps hurling soldiers non-stop into war. And the death tolls of the North were basically double what the death tolls of the South were. But Grant knows this, and he knows that he can just keep hurling people, this war of attrition, basically fight until the South runs out of people, runs out of resources. So this is what he does. He marches another 122,000 soldiers. It's like 2 football stadiums. I'm just trying to use things to put it into your mind the right way. Into Chancellorsville and into Virginia, and he takes his advantages. And there's a quote here about Grant. One of his soldiers said, Grant is either being whipped and forced to force us into war, or he just doesn't care if we all die. So that's one of his soldiers, and they respected him. But that's just, the mindset, you could say, of Grant in this war. So he's achieving slow success, using his advantages. He's taking his losses, and he's pressing on. Okay, more than halfway, guys. Next, we are going to do Sherman's March to Sea. Sherman's March to Sea. Now, here's another guy that is a Union. By the way, this is the time in class where I would say, do you have any questions? Do you have any? Because I've talked a lot, and you guys would probably just look at me and be like, okay, great, no questions. All right, let's move on here. But I know I'm doing a lot. If you guys have questions, you can always ask me, please. Always rewind. I'm just trying to cover like a lot of information in our last day here. Okay. So 2 more slides of information. This one's pretty short here. So now we have another Union general that comes to be and becomes very strong, very powerful, very important. His name is William Tecumseh Sherman. We'll just call him Sherman, General Sherman. He is just like Grant. Okay. He matches his tenacity, his ambition, he was moody as well, just like Grant. He was adamant in a lot of his different ways. He was stubborn, I guess you can say. He was a brilliant military thinker. He also supported the war of attrition. So he is going to, we have Grant up north, and we have Sherman now down south. So Sherman is in the Carolinas. He's in Georgia. He's in, Atlanta, Georgia. He's down in Louisiana. So he's down south right now, and Grant is up north. Okay. In your mind, make a prediction right now. What do we think is going to happen to General Lee, who in his men is in the middle? Okay. You got Grant up in Pennsylvania, Northern Virginia. You got Sherman down south now with another 100,000 men or so in the Carolinas. Lee's in the middle. What do we think is going to happen at the end of this war here? Make a prediction, start thinking about it. But Sherman here left. He was so controversial for a lot of different reasons. Definitely asking you a question about this. But Sherman fought a war of attrition where it was slow progress. But his thought about war was total war. Okay. I am going to do, this is him talking, I guess you could say, I am going to do everything I have to win this war. I don't care what people think about me. This is not a popularity contest. This is not an opportunity to please others. I'm going to do what it takes to win this war. I don't care about basically anything. Okay. So while he's down south, he's in the Carolinas, like I said, North Carolina, South Carolina. He's got men, in Georgia, in Atlanta, in Savannah, 2 very, prominent cities in Atlanta, in Georgia. As he marches through the Confederacy, through the South, he destroys everything in his path. Okay. His men, I'll move myself here for a second. Picture to the right, bottom right here is his men destroying railroad lines. They don't want the South being able to go anywhere. They want them locked in. So they're burning railroads. They are chopping. They're ruining everything they can with hammers, with explosives, with they're tearing wires down. They're tearing everything possible. It's gone. Factories, they're burning them as Sherman is marching through the South. Crops, so that the South obviously needs to eat, right? Crops gone. Okay, they're ripping them out of the ground. They're burning them. Obviously, the North is taking whatever food they can while they're passing, and then they're just ripping the crops out. Livestock, cows, pigs, horses, sheep, killing them, unfortunately, sadly, because they provide what? Meat, milk, eggs, chicken, whatever. Killing livestock, destroying farmhouses, not necessarily murdering innocent civilians, but empty farmhouses, he's destroying them. Okay. He also set fire to the cities of Atlanta and Savannah, which are both in Georgia. So Sherman, coming from the South as a Union leader, we can have this discussion forever. Rules of war. Is he allowed to do this? But he basically tears up the entire South. This is actually similar to what's the strategy called? Burnt. No. Russia did it in World War II. In World War II. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. Scorched earth policy. That's what it is. He's basically going through and just getting rid of everything. Lighting fires to everything. So this left scars with the South even after the war. When the country was under Reconstruction, people still kind of looked at Sherman as like evil because of what he did. But you could also make the argument that this is war and anything goes in war. There's different arguments here. And as the Civil War slowly comes to a close, we have Mr. Sherman here from the South. And again, we have Grant up from the North. And I'm sure you made this prediction already. They're going to slowly sandwich Lee, who's in the middle. Lee is actually, he's got one option. He's going to try to flee. He can't flee east because east would be the ocean. He tries to flee west eventually. But in the end of the war here, they're not going to let him escape this last time like he's been escaping. Okay. Here is that, I guess you could say, scorched earth policy. This is either Atlanta or Savannah. I'm not exactly sure what city this is from, both in Georgia. And the Union's marching through. This is supposed to be Sherman right here, and he's just marching through. Looks like he's smoking a cigar, having a good time. Like, all right, let's burn this place down. Let's go. Let's keep marching, Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. He's not so important, but Sherman's from Tennessee. He's basically the commander of the Tennessee Army, which is a little west, a little south. Just going to throw this in there. This obviously has to do with the Civil War, but an election came up literally during the second to last year of the Civil War in 1864. And really interesting about this election, too, we'll get back to Sherman. South didn't vote. So you could see this is 1864, 1 year left in the Civil War here. Only the Union states or the neutral states actually voted. And who did he run against? Who did Abraham Lincoln run against? He ran against McClellan. He ran against General McClellan, and he eventually fired. It's not like they really hated each other necessarily, but Lincoln was I'm going to slide this over for you. Lincoln was like the National Union Party. He was technically a Republican, and the Democratic nominee was McClellan. Now, there were differences between Republican and Democrats now, so don't link the two now. But in terms of the popular vote, McClellan actually got a decent amount of votes here. So people might have thought that Lincoln didn't end the war fast enough, but he did have a lot of support, as you could see, about 2.2 million votes, 55% of the popular. And in terms of the electoral vote, he crushed McClellan, 233 to 81. So, Lincoln gets reelected, and then it's kind of like, all right, let me focus on the election. All right, back to the Civil War now, okay? And this is it. Here's our last slide here, guys. Can't believe it. The surrender. Appomattox. I'm going to say it one more time. Appomattox. Surrender. Appomattox. Maybe two more times. So Sherman, as we said earlier, marches north. He goes through South Carolina. He goes through North Carolina. And he slowly makes his way up. What's the final plan? They took the Mississippi, the Union. Now they want to take one more thing to totally knock the Confederacy and Lee out. They want to take the Confederate capital, which is Richmond, Virginia. Okay. So let's surround them. Let's do it. Union, let's do it. So they march. This is, by the way, here is Savannah in Georgia. Here is Atlanta. Those are the two cities that Sherman burned. Comes through South Carolina, comes through North Carolina, makes his way up into Virginia, while from the north, we have Grant absolutely battering it. His men are coming down from Gettysburg, from where there was a second battle of Bull Run. This is also where Antietam was. So basically, you got a pinch job here. You got from the north, Grant, from the south, Sherman, and Lee doesn't have much of a choice here in Virginia near this Appomattox courthouse. Appomattox is not a city. It's just the name of it. Actually, it might be a city, but it's just this little tiny courthouse. But Lee tries to escape west. He's got no choices, right? Can't run south. He's into Sherman. Can't run north into Grant. Can't just go in the ocean. He's going to try to escape west. What has been the problem with the Union? They can't finish them because they keep letting Lee escape. Grant steps in, heroic move, says, they ain't leaving this time. There is no chance we're letting them escape. As Lee tries to escape, they're pursued by Sherman's men from the southeast, Grant's men from the northeast, and they're basically trapped. And Lee, Robert E. Lee, the great, brave, phenomenal military leader, has really no choice, and he's got to survive. He's got to surrender. So this is as the war is coming to an end, and the date is April 9th. Remember that date, April 9th, 1865. April 9th, 1865 is when General Lee of the South, General Grant in the North meet up at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, and they're going to discuss the terms of surrender here. So while this is all going on, the Northern people are celebrating. Not like I'm talking about the soldiers that are watching the surrender. They are celebrating. They're going crazy. Let's go. We just did this. Like they won the championship. I mean, it's a big deal. You just won the Civil War after you lost so many lives and friends and family members, and you might be wounded yourself. So they are so excited. But Grant gets up in front of all of them. The Northern leader eventually becomes the 18th president, gets up in front of them and says, stop cheering. The war is over. That's great that we won. But now these rebels are enemies. They're our countrymen again. They're our people now. We are now going to be one united nation again, and we need to heal. So he's saying, stop showing off, stop rubbing in their face. It's great that we won, but don't make them feel bad. We won. That's it. Beat them. But now we need to heal. We got to come together. And that's a whole nother topic that we were supposed to get to this year, but we didn't. Reconstruction, how the nation is going to heal. Think about how a nation has to heal after all of this and come back together again. It is going to take years and years. And some people argue maybe we're still not healed from all the tension, but it's going to take a long time. But anyway, the war, there's the quote, the war is over, but the rebels are our countrymen again. About 2-3 weeks later, Joseph Johnston surrenders to Sherman and the war officially ends. You could say April 9th, but also April 26th is when the war truly drew to a close, where every Southern general surrendered. And what were the terms of surrender? Basically, that the war is over. If I'm Grant speaking to Lee, Grant is saying, your officers can keep their sidearms, they can keep their guns. The other soldiers need to turn in their weapons. We'll feed all of your soldiers right now, Mr. Lee. We will we'll help you. We'll take care of you. You just have to surrender, sign this paper. And this was a time of honor and a time of code. And if you signed a paper that said that you're going to surrender, you were surrendering. It's just the way that things were. Lee wasn't going to sign the paper and say, I surrender, leave the courthouse and do a surprise attack. I mean, maybe today you might see something like that, but this is something that didn't really happen, in the 1860s. So this is them in the courthouse here. There's General Grant on the left with some of his men, General Lee on the right. This guy looks like he just saw a ghost. I'm not sure what he's doing. It's like, who's that guy? Oh my gosh. But everyone else said with their great facial hair, you could see here hanging out. And there is, let's see here. Yep, there's Grant and there's Lee, signing the surrender papers. I don't know what the official name is for the terms of surrender. And that's pretty much it. So the war is over. And that's, the Civil War in a nutshell. This is our 6th video. It's so many videos, guys. But I really hope that you guys learned a lot, throughout this. Just a couple more things I'm going to touch on here. This is basically, I think I have three pictures, and this is it. Obviously, the Civil War changed America drastically. And you could think a lot about, like, what if one thing went differently? What if there's so many butterfly effect scenarios? Think, what if Stonewall Jackson wasn't killed? What if in a battle Grant got killed? Would the war have changed different? Would the war have changed drastically? Would the South have won? Would we still not be the United States of America? Well, we might be, but if you lived in South Carolina, would you be the Confederate States of America? Would there be a different country still? Would there be another Civil War eventually? Like, it's crazy that one shot could have possibly changed the Civil War. Like I said, you could argue that one shot, the person that we don't even know who shot and killed Stonewall Jackson, or any situation. I keep referring to that one, but the butterfly effect and how things could have changed. But it changed our nation, and it leaves deep scars. Like, this is not just a quick fight, an argument. This is not just like, hey, we're arguing. Okay, it's over. We're friends again. Like, this is a lot of bloodshed, and you guys can see the number of casualties here. The total deaths. This is in the thousands. The North being blue, the South being red. The North looks like they lost 360,000 people. The South losing like 260,000 people. So not exactly double, but the North definitely lost more than the South. A lot of non-battle deaths just from disease and from malnutrition and not eating. But that's a lot of deaths. The totals are between 600 and 7,000 people who died in sacrifice, and all American citizens. This is not World War I or II, where it's like a couple Americans and some people from other countries too. This is all, American people. So this is crazy enough. The date, April 9th, is when this happens, when we have Grant and Lee. 5 days later, Lincoln, who worked his tail off and was such a brave, bold leader, and who, dealt with a lot of hardship in his life. 5 days later, Lincoln gets assassinated. So, this is a whole nother story. This is John Wilkes Booth. It's in a theater, Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln's out just to watch a show, watch a performance. He gets shot in the back of the head by this man, John Wilkes Booth. He was an actor, I believe. And he shot him. He was a Confederate man and didn't believe in what Lincoln did and was unhappy with the result of the Civil War. And he walked up right to him and shot him in the back of the head. And Lincoln, he died pretty quickly. The man that walks you through and gets you through the Civil War as a nation, things would have, in my opinion, went much smoother if he was also the man that was in office for the next 3 or 4 years. That can heal the nation, that can help everybody come back together. Okay. Unfortunately for Lincoln, obviously he's dead, but his vice president at this time, his vice president before was a guy, last name was Hadlin, I forget his first name, but his vice president was a guy named Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was not like Lincoln. I'm not going to get lost in all the details here, but he was not very similar to Lincoln, and now it was not Lincoln's job for Reconstruction to put the nation back together. It was up to Johnson, and Johnson was very into punishing the South and was not nice at all to the South, which just created deeper divisions and deeper hatred for the North and South. So I think Lincoln would have done it more peacefully and put our nation together more peacefully with laws and with, but think about all the destruction, burning of cities and killing of people and farmlands and crops and just the overall, cultural tensions between the North and the South. The years after, which is again called Reconstruction, is gonna be a hard fight. Just as, I guess, mentally, exhausting as the Civil War as well. Okay, and this is just a picture of Reconstruction here and the arguments that are going on. But I can get lost. I can keep talking, so I'm gonna stop right there, guys. So can't believe this is it. This is the last video lesson of the year. So we'll end on this picture because I think it's a nice picture that shows a little bit of togetherness and agreement. So this is it. I'm sure we will talk before the end of the year, guys. I hope you have the best day ever, and hope you enjoy the video. Do your best on it. Remember, this is your last quiz grade of the year, so work hard. I'm going to get to those emails while you guys are working on this. So I think I had a couple emails in the last day or so, and that's it. If you guys need anything, I'm here. I got you. And miss you guys like always. Good luck. Have a great day. Let me know if you have questions, and we'll talk soon. Okay? Bye, guys.